Welcome to episode number 13 of the First Responder Wellness Podcast, the show where we talk about wellness, mental health, leadership, and what it takes to have a wellness culture within your organization. Hi, my name is Conrad Weaver. I'm a filmmaker and podcast host and the director of the award-winning film PTSD 911. For the past 4 years, I've been working with first responders from all across the USA to bring wellness to the forefront of our conversations. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Medina Baumgart. Dr. Baumgart is a licensed psychologist in California and a board-certified specialist in police and public safety psychology. She has extensive experience working with sworn and civilian law enforcement personnel in both correctional and agency settings. In her book, Surviving Retirement, Finding Purpose and Fulfillment Beyond the Badge, she combines real-life insights, professional expertise, and practical strategies to help retiring cops and their spouses prepare for and navigate the changes inherent in retirement from a law enforcement career. Tune in for my conversation with Dr. Medina Baumgart. Hey, I really appreciate you listening to the podcast. And if you think others would too, please subscribe and share. That helps us get the word out to others. And I want you to know that you can access this interview on our YouTube channel for absolutely free. Visit youtube.com and search PTSD 911 movie. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, please send me an email and tell me about your company or organization. If you are looking to spread the word about what you do in the first responder space, this show may be a great fit for you. I would love to talk to you about how we can help. Thanks again for listening. And now here's my interview with Dr. Medina Baumgart. Well, Medina, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. It's really great to see you and looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what's your connection to first responders?
Sure. So I have a very personal connection. I'm married to a police officer. We've been together for over 20 years. So I was with him for the last half of his job and then into his retirement, which that was an adventure. And then I've also been working with first responders since 2008. Mm-hmm. So I first started out my career in a correctional setting and then moved over to a law enforcement agency. Mm-hmm. So primarily I conduct counseling, critical incident debriefings, and I work with our peer support and chaplains programs.
Mm-hmm. And you are a psychologist, right? You have a doctorate in psychology?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. My doctorate's in psychology, and then I'm board certified in police and public safety psychology.
Okay. Awesome. So were you interested in all of that before you met your husband, or was that something that kind of came as a result of your relationship?
I actually started when my interest was on the criminal side of the house, and working a lot in the correctional settings with the mental health court. It was great until it just wasn't fulfilling for me. And an opportunity came up with my law enforcement agency that I'm with now. I lateraled over there and I couldn't be happier.
Mm-hmm. What have you seen just in the conversations you've had over the past, over your career, working with these groups? What have you seen as far as the conversation related to mental health and wellness? How has that evolved?
I'll say just in the, relatively short amount of time, just over a decade that I've been working with law enforcement personnel, I would say, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, it's definitely been more openly talked about. One of the fantastic opportunities that I get is working with our, peer support program. And so a lot of those have lived experience, both in personal and professional lives. And so, they're able to openly talk about the issues impacting them. I'm able to openly share, stuff on the relationship side. So I think a lot of law enforcement professionals, and spouses, we talk about the relationship stuff. I'm seeing and hearing more on the trauma, post-traumatic stress injuries, and just overall mental health and taking care of yourself. I think this job, we know, taxes your physical, mental, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, relationships. And I feel like that's getting talked about more and more.
Yeah. I know in the LA area, you guys had a tragedy a couple of weeks ago with 4 sheriff's deputies who took their own lives. Has that impacted your work, and has that impacted the people that you work with?
Oh, immensely. Yes. I think there's a lot of, acknowledgement of the impact of the job. Situations like this, unfortunately, they're very tragic, but they also bring to light how important it is to take care of yourselves and to check in on one another. And I think it's just the accumulation of everything, all of the staffing shortages, mandatory overtime and things that are impacting law enforcement officers nationwide. And this, I think, just highlights the cumulative toll of everything.
Yeah. And, I know the national FOP, their research, they found that the institutional stress is probably one of the top stressors for law
Yes.
enforcement, especially. And I was actually talking with a retired fire chief yesterday here locally, and he was talking about an incident, here with the local department, and how that is absolutely true in the fire world as well. How those challenges, whether it's staffing, whether it's just poor leadership or whatever, that really impacts our first responders. What have you seen, and how do you deal with that in your practice when someone comes and says, "Well, my supervisor is doing this," or I'm struggling with this because of mandatories, or what do how do you deal with those kind of situations?
I think, I always start with getting a basic snapshot of, I guess we'll call it like overall stress management. Just so on a daily basis, what are you doing for yourself? And then also looking at components of the stressor. Are there ways to utilize your own strengths to maybe contribute to a solution? Sometimes within organizations, that's not possible. So then it goes down to, okay, well, what can I do in my kind of sphere of influence to take care of myself, and then to also, take care of my partners. And then the other piece of that is looking at broader identity, right? So we know, and that's something that comes up in retirement too, is that when you overinvest in the job, which my husband did this, everything that happens feels very personal. And so the response that you're going to have is almost akin to being personally attacked. And your body doesn't distinguish between physical threat or emotional,
right?
Occupational threat.
Yeah. So you can take on those stresses, make it a personal thing when it may actually not be directly personal.
Yeah. And being able to distinguish between, okay, what is, actually happening? What's the reality-based components of this? And then what is the emotional load of all of this? Because sometimes with the reality-based components, there may be things that you're able to do to counter some of that negative impact. In some situations, it's, part of the package, and there's not much you can do to directly control that. So then the priority switches over to, okay, how am I going to manage and work through all of these other things that are getting stirred up? Maybe it's a matter of reprioritizing your life and looking at, okay, how much am I investing in this job? Not only when I'm there, but when I'm not there. And, maybe I do care about my family, but I really haven't been doing a ton to invest in them lately. And so sometimes it's a matter of just reprioritizing things so that when you're at work, and learning to be at home when you're home.
It's interesting that, today I was actually the last couple of days I've been scrolling through YouTube reels. I'm sure what they're called on YouTube, but they're little short videos, and you just see one after another and after another. And I guess the algorithm is, if you watch a couple of them that are similar themes, now you start seeing more and more of those same themes, and it can lead you down a dark, depressing hole.
Absolutely.
How much does perhaps negative things about first responders, about law enforcement, how, in social media, how does that play with an officer's head? If they're sitting in their cruiser and there's not much going on, they get their phone out and they're starting to scroll, how can that impact someone in law enforcement?
Yeah, a ton. I actually even recommend officers to take a break from social media, and family members also, because, it's from day one of the academy, this job, all of the training, all of the experience really conditions and reinforces to look for the worst.
Sure.
Right. And that's a matter of officer safety when we're talking about, working. And so it's very important. The problem is that it also changes the lens that you view self, others, and the world at
Mm-hmm.
large. Right. And so when we're, looking on social media and talking about that sphere of influence,
Mm-hmm.
right, I may not be able to control this critical incident or this bad thing that just happened, but I can control whether or not I sit and scroll through stuff. And sometimes I'll see this after like officer involved shootings, because that nervous system and everything is just locked into this thing just happened. It almost, I'll talk to so many officers that'll just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, almost like they're looking for some sort of like validation or reinforcement for what they're feeling. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And all it does is reinforce the bad and almost keep the brain and body in that, survival mode.
I remember back years ago when 9/11 happened. And I just remember back then, it was before social media and before we had all these devices that could feed us, all the stuff. I sat in front of my TV for, it seemed like days, just watching those towers come down over and over and over again. And it's kind of exactly what you were saying, kind of looking for that thing to give me some good feeling about this, or just soaking it in. And I couldn't find it, and I just kept watching,
Yep.
almost obsessively. And
Mm-hmm.
it was, I think all of America was kind of in that place in a
Yes.
way. And so now it's so much more accessible right here on our devices, and it's really scary and sad how we've become so
Yeah.
attached to these things, and I know studies have been done about the mental health crisis in America and how there was a spike as soon as the first smartphone came out, a spike in mental health issues,
Yeah.
and so, and I'm sure, that also affects our first responders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they don't, it's there's so much training on how do you respond to things. And people don't call 911 to say, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm having a good day."
Right.
Right? It's all
Or
this
thank you
this
for your
this
work. Thank
bad.
you for your job.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just calling you at their
Yeah,
worst moment,
exactly.
whatever that is. And, when that happens, it's like your brain just gets so used to responding to stuff, and you learn to seemingly kind of override or condition your stress response to be able to function during these very intensely stressful situations. And there's not a ton of training on how do you recover. And sure, the post-traumatic stress injury, that's a component of it. But even just biologically, how do you teach and train your nervous system to recover from all of that stuff? Because first responders work against their biology every shift. You get an adrenaline dump. Naturally, we want to kind of coast on down and recover. That takes 18 to 24 hours.
Yeah, and they're off
It's
to the
not
next
possible for first.
off to the next call, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like their body and their brain get so used to being stuck on that mode without any of the tools or training on how to do a nice reset or counter the realities of, hey, it takes the human body typically 18 to 24 hours to recover after an adrenaline dump. Okay, well, you don't have that much as a first responder. So how are you going to help your body and your brain out so that it gets whatever it can get and squeeze into that short amount of time?
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast today from Ed Mylett. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's like a billionaire guy that is kind of a personal development coach as well. And he was talking about how what we eat now affects us 72 hours later. What we consume now affects our bodies later. And so it's important to know, okay, if I'm doing this thing in 3 days and I've got to eat healthy and eat the right things now to prepare myself for that. And I think sometimes if you think about first responders and, everything we put in our body affects us one way or another, and I think when first responders are on the job and, that they don't eat well often, they're not taking care of themselves. They're not doing those things that really need to not only prepare them for now and for this shift, but for the shifts, 2 days from now.
Exactly. And that's that's another example too. There's so many things that first responders can do to kind of maximize what their body and brain naturally is designed to do. And sometimes it's countering those bad habits or gaining some of that education and additional, supportive resources to maybe get that diet back on track.
Yeah.
You know?
So all of this kind of leads down a path and through one's career to those when you start thinking about the future and what's next after the job, right? And we're talking about retirement, and you wrote a book about this. You wrote a book called Surviving Retirement. So why, how, we know it's important to start thinking about that, but oftentimes we don't. At what point should someone in law enforcement or first responder start thinking about retirement, and why is that important?
I would honestly say from the second that you get on, you should be thinking about it. The biggest reason there is a lot of the different tools and strategies that you need to put in place to kind of ease that transition are things that you can be doing to counter some of those negative byproducts of the job throughout your career. Additionally, there's situations where you may not be able to complete your job as you wanted to. Maybe there's an injury or an illness, or there's, political or organizational things that are going on that kind of make you feel forced out too. So it's trying to get away from that. Okay, I have to do this many years, although that's definitely a goal. Also be thinking of, okay, well, what if I get injured, or what if I get sick? What if something else happens that pushes me out of this, job? And you want to be prepared as soon as possible. With respect to retirement, I would say day one after you graduate the academy is ideal. At minimum 5 years prior to retirement, I would say, because that gives you plenty of time to start pulling in some of these tools and countering and teaching your brain and body how to kind of shift modes.
I was talking with actually yesterday's episode. We're in November right now, but yesterday's episode of the podcast, I talked to Mike Ming, who's retired from Cal Fire. And he said something on the show that was really, really key. And I want to give it to you and see what you say. He said that, firefighting was my job. It was what paid the bills and what, gave me an income and put a roof over my head. But I knew and he got this from someone else. He said, find out what you would like to do after you retire and start working on that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not doing it now, it's a good chance you might not do it then. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, part of it, and it's interesting because I think we hear so often, at least more now, right? This job doesn't define you, right? We hear that a lot. It gets a little complicated, right?
Sure.
And sometimes the culture wants you to be all about this job. The job demands essentially put you in a position where, you may be spending more time at work than at home.
You should be all in.
Exactly. And if you're not, then you're looked at differently by your peers, but I definitely agree, because with retirement, it's a lot of those things and different activities and interests and stuff, they take time. They're habits, right? They're these behaviors that you learn over time and that get reinforced over time. And if the expectation is, hey, you're going to retire from this job that we know is not the healthiest for you, and then magically have all of these wonderful ideas of stuff that you might want to do, chances are, I completely agree, you're probably not going to, or when you try it and it doesn't succeed or doesn't give you maybe quite the pizzazz that you want it to, you're going to feel, maybe like you failed or disappointed. And then that can diminish any interest that you have in pursuing anything beyond, because you had that disappointing experience.
Before we started recording, you mentioned that your husband had gone through the process of retirement. What were some of the biggest challenges you guys faced in that process?
Yeah. I would say, so he retired after a 29-year career. And I would say for the most part, he'd been in a couple shootings, big incidents were some specialized teams. And pretty much, he displayed himself as pretty kind of well contained when we talk about emotion, right? He's a typical all in, I'm going to work all the weekends, all the holidays. I don't really show a ton of emotion. So the psychologist part of my brain said, okay, this is going to be a problem. The wife part of my brain was like, please just retire because I'm tired of you being angry. And I think that when he retired, I had expected him to struggle, but not to the extent that he did. And so one of the biggest challenges for us, the initial month or so wasn't bad, to be quite honest. It felt like vacation, right? That stress, that initial stress dissipated. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get my husband back. This is great. You go relax and enjoy yourself. You earned it. Once that started to settle in, and he really, really, really felt the impact of that loss of identity, routine, socialization, camaraderie, meaning and purpose, that really hit. So for him, he fell into a deep depression and he started leaning on alcohol, something he did throughout his career. Right. And he really started leaning on that. And it became, okay, I'm not just having a, drink or two in the backyard or going to Taco Tuesday and having a beer or two. Now I'm drinking every single day. And, and he started to become really reckless. And that caused a lot of problems for us. And then additionally, I guess my own routine too. I wasn't even thinking about me or my routine. And realizing, I think as first responder spouses, we get so used to running our own program because they're working. Sure. We have to. And then, it goes from that program to now he's home 24/7. So now it's messing up my program. And so we really started butting heads. And that really kind of set me on this pace to learn about retirement. Not something I ever thought about previously, other than I just want my husband to make it to retirement. And that was it. But it really got me looking into, okay, there's more to this.
Sure.
And it's not, yes, there's the mental health component, but there's the relationship component. There's the biological component. I mean, your body gets so used to operating on this roller coaster. Dr. Kevin Gilmartin talks about it in his book, that biological roller coaster of hypervigilance. I mean, that's a real thing. Your body and your nervous system doesn't get the memo right away that you retired. It still thinks it's going to work, so it's kind of still doing these dips. And what that translated to on the home front in retirement is he was having moments of like anxiety or feeling panicked. We actually had a trip to the emergency room because we thought he was having a heart attack. He would get up and just pace and move around a lot. And so it felt like this just very like anxious, almost agitated energy. And he would start just picking small like verbal arguments because he needed to release that stuff and he no longer had work to do it. And so that caused us to butt heads an immense amount, that first few years. And then I was talking to other retirees and spouses, and we weren't unique. This is happening. I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? I think the expectation is you retire and, hey, happy retirement, enjoy.
Sail off into the sunset, right?
Yeah. In reality, it's like, hey, we're going to, have however many years in this job that we know is going to mess you up. And then have fun in retirement. Like, wait, no, we're not, you're not equipped.
Right.
And so that's really what inspired me to initially develop a class. And then the book came out of the class because other people who were coming in saying, hey, you need to write a book about this stuff. And we kind of pulled together some just real life insights and experiences that my husband and both of us went through during his adjustment, why it happens, and then just some practical tools. I call it like training up for retirement. So you have to train up to meet the demands of the job, your entire career. You got to train up to meet the demands of retirement.
Did you guys seek outside help to kind of guide you through this?
We did not. And it's funny because, I'm a police psychologist, but my husband is very anti-shrink, as he says.
He's married to
I went
one,
after
right?
my shootings. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because, as a psychologist, I have all of this knowledge and experience. I can help other people, but it's a completely different animal when it's my own husband.
So how do you
right?
deal with
There's
that? I
proximity
mean,
there.
how do you separate the wife part of you from the psychologist part of you when he's going through his stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish I, I wish I could say, hey, here's how to do it. It's
Mm,
tough. And I think I have to remember, that psychologist piece is there,
mm,
but I have to let it inform how I support him as a
mm,
wife. Right. Because if I start, he calls it sounding like a psychologist.
mm,
Right. So if I start
mm.
sounding like a
Yeah.
psychologist, he'll shut
You know
down.
to back off, right?
Yeah. So it's a matter of really just, the communication piece is so
Mhm,
important. In the communication piece, one thing I had him do as he was coming out of the depression, is I had him write down on a notepad. I want you to write down every single thing that you wish you would have known
mhm,
about, that you'd want your partners to know about. And that's how we had structured our class initially, and then later the book.
mhm,
And then I talked with a couple hundred retirees and spouses just to kind of get their
mhm,
take. And a lot of it is there were some trends on the folks that eased into retirement a lot better than others. But yeah, it's tricky.
mhm. What were some of the success stories of people who successfully navigated that move into retirement? Do you have any
Hmm.
anecdotes there?
Yes, I
Mm,
do. So I have a couple. So I have a few that are pre-retirement that actually sought
mhm,
counseling to kind of relearn. He had one retiree tell me that they were learning how to be a human
mhm,
being again,
mm,
and really relearning, not only processing different, let's say, unresolved, traumatic incidents through the career, but really processing emotion very
mm,
differently. So you're no longer having to contain it to get through the job, but you're having to process it, because retirement gets rid of the distraction of
mm,
work. And oftentimes there's no opportunity to process stuff because you're just going. And so, I have a couple retirees who pre-retirement sought out counseling just to help them relearn how to be human
mm,
again. And they eased into retirement. And then some that were after the
mhm,
fact, some coming into class. And we've had through our class, couples that will email me later on saying, thank you
mm,
so much. We thought we were crazy.
mhm.
And sometimes it's a matter of just knowing, hey, you're not crazy. This is why this stuff
Yeah.
happens. Here's a frame of reference. Your frame of reference is everything's
Mm,
bad.
mhm.
Humans are bad. Life is bad. Everything sucks. That's your frame of
Sure.
reference. So when stuff starts happening in retirement, well, what are you going to do? You're going to stick it in that,
Mhm,
basket instead of, hey, this is my body naturally responding to years of, being put through the ringer. That's why this is happening.
mm,
And then you start to regain a better sense of control
mm,
there. And so those success stories are really kind of I put those into two categories. The ones that proactively did the work going into retirement, they were better equipped to navigate some of those very natural and normal adjustments. And then the ones after the fact that said, hey, I can't do this alone.
mhm,
I need some help
mhm,
here. And I've seen some do that through formal counseling. Some do that just by finding some healthy, retired law enforcement
mhm,
officers that they
mhm,
can connect with, that can kind of walk with them through it so they're not having to do
mhm.
it alone.
Do agencies provide uh, some? I know there's some peer support groups who have kind of
Mm-hmm.
a retirement chapter or retirement part of their peer support. Is that something that you've seen, or is
Mm-hmm.
that something that would be helpful?
Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely helpful. I've seen that. I know with the peer support program I work with, we're just now starting to bring in
Mhm,
retirees. I think that's immensely helpful. Programs like
mhm,
Copline, which that's fully staffed by retired
mhm,
police officers and that are heavily vetted and trained
mhm,
to do that. I think that's immensely helpful because you really need people who have walked that
mhm,
walk. I think that's going to have the most impact. Coupled with some pre-retirement, just education. Because I think for us, I know with my husband's retirement seminar, it talked about finances, healthcare, benefits, estate planning, things like that. I think the mental health portion was essentially don't be an alcoholic. That was it.
That's helpful.
Yeah, drinking's bad. I'm like, really? Because you just spent an entire career doing just that.
Right. Now you have more time.
Yeah. So it's finding those ways of, how do you cope with this stuff? And I think, it's the same reason I love working with peer support in the job I have now. I can be up there talking about from my perspective, talking about why these things are important. And that's going to resonate, but it resonates on a different level when you have somebody who's been through that or is actively working through that to say, hey, yeah, no, this is pretty tough. One of the things my husband does now is he'll actually talk when we do our class, he'll talk about it, his experiences, and then other people that we know that are retiring from the job or getting close to retirement. He'll kind of, hey, we need to have a conversation. And then I'll usually take the spouses and say, we need to have a conversation.
It's about finding and living out that purpose, having purpose.
Absolutely.
I know if you don't have purpose in general, you're wandering aimlessly, and it can be really bad. But especially someone that has had that focus for so many years of this is what I do, this is my job, this is my purpose. Now, when there's not that, and having something to go to that is so vital in a healthy life to be able to. I mean. We know what the average age of retirement is, 62 in law enforcement, and that's also the average age of death. Yeah. There's a correlation, right? And so when you have purpose, I think you can mitigate that.
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of managing expectations. So in talking with retirees, so many are looking for that thing that's almost going to replace what the job felt like. I always say, I don't really think that's possible. I don't mean that in a depressing way. I mean that in a very beautiful way. Is this job is so unique, and there's so many aspects that are irreplaceable. So it's not so much, let's find a direct replacement for this. Is, hey, let's find different ways of regaining some of that meaning and purpose. I don't think it's just one thing that's going to do it for you.
I think we see
many things
in a lot of retirement communities, a lot of, older population, we see more and more people volunteering and doing things, giving back, serving, nonprofits, serving the community food bank or whatever it may be. I think if people that are in retirement can start thinking, okay, what do I enjoy? What do I enjoy doing? What can I do to give back? And then finding that niche, that thing that, turns that kind of lights their fire. I think that might be helpful. Just
and oftentimes it is service to others. When you look at retirees who are doing really well in retirement, there's something in that equation that involves service to others.
Yeah.
In whatever capacity. And it can be tricky too, because, we know that socialization is so important. Connection, right? We're wired to connect. And it can be a challenge for some first responders because the job wires you essentially to protect. Right. And so you have years of a job that tells you protect, that exposes you to kind of this ugly, dark side of humanity. And then you're supposed to magically want to connect and trust people. And, it doesn't happen that easily.
Right.
And so, and I think that's when I work with retirees, that's probably where I get the most pushback is when I have to talk to people. I have to have a meaningful relationship. What? No, I don't like people. But it's so, so, so important. And I tell them, look, you don't need to be a social butterfly. You need one meaningful relationship. In addition, I would say to a spouse or significant other, you need one friendship, somebody that you can talk to, like genuinely talk to and have that meaningful connection. Just one.
What's been the biggest or the thing that has really helped you guys navigate this as a couple?
Communication. And the communication is sometimes, for us, I think in terms of routine, he would come home from work, and there was a period of time where I was excited he's home, and I didn't quite understand fully the demands that were
Mm.
placed on him in terms of his bandwidth when he came home. So he'd come through the door, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you all about my day, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "I can't listen right now." Like his brain is shutting down. And we found in retirement, we had a complete role reversal because I'm still working. So now I'm coming home. He's excited to see me. And now he's doing the same thing. So one of the communication things that we had to kind of reinstitute was something that got us through, when he was working is we call it our 10-minute rule. So if at any point in time, and it could be either of us, we're just at our capacity to actually just sit and listen, we'll say, "Hey, I need 10 minutes. And for us, I call that the marriage saver, because it's our nice way of saying, "I can't right now. I just need time to either decompress, whatever. And then when I come back, I'm going to be good to go." So the communication has been immense. And then also too, I think, in terms of the service to others, really taking on, which we didn't anticipate, taking on this class and the book and the different conversations that's opened up. I think for me, it feels great. And I know for my husband, I honestly think that's his way of serving others, is getting folks ready, and people who are struggling will reach out to him, and, "Hey, let me help you." Or, "Yeah, this one does suck. It's going to be rough for a little bit." And just finding those connections and ways to give back, I think, are immensely helpful.
Wow. Well, this is amazing stuff that you're presenting here, and I really appreciate it. What,
Thanks.
from your perspective, what's been the biggest surprise about retirement?
Oof. I would say that we're both adjusting together, because I did not in any, I always go back and think like, wait, was I thinking about that? I never thought about that. I was solely focused on him. Towards the end of his career, he was very angry and grumpy. So my nightmare was, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke, either right before or right after you retire. And he's 7 years into retirement now. So he beat that, 5-year post-retirement window. But I would say it was that adjustment didn't affect him in isolation. That affected both of us. And so I think it's important working through retirement, especially if you're in a relationship, family, recognize that you're doing that together. Because I think if either one of us tried to do that alone, it wouldn't work.
What would you guys as a couple, what would you do different, say 5 years out from retirement? What would you do different?
Oh my goodness. I would definitely say start exploring those outside the job things, whatever they are, and figure out, okay, well, what do we want to do? Getting some of the routine down, I think. If we had a do-over, I would probably have him take some of that time that gets accumulated, over the course of the career. And let's say that last year or two before retirement, take off a little bit more work so you can start adjusting to having more time on your hands, not only for him, but for us too. But most definitely, I would say it would be preparing, finding those things to do, really getting his body conditioned. One of the things he's done more of now is get back into the gym. And that helps him. He'll say that helps him maintain his sanity. And like many officers, I think that fell off the last half of his career because he was working so much. But yeah, I would definitely say preparing and finding those outside activities more.
So what's the future for you guys in the retirement journey?
I have no idea. I think, it's an ongoing adjustment. I mean, there's still moments where he'll have feelings of depression that will creep in. And now he knows, okay, when is it just I think as humans, we all have our off days. So when is it just a day where I need to kind of stay in and just take care of myself today versus when is this now depression and, one day is turning into 2 or 3 or, more. So, I mean, he definitely still has his moments. But now he understands them better. We understand them better. And so I think it's easier for us to navigate that. But the book, just coming out earlier this year has been a lot of fun. We just launched our on-demand version of our class, which is a lot of fun. But I really think for us, it's, kind of continuing what we were working on, and then helping other people, because I don't think retirement is talked about enough. When I was looking at stuff, it was, hey, this is this is why retirement's difficult for cops. The end. Like, all right, well, what do we do about that? And kind of really just, teaching and having those conversations is, hey, the job is going to end at some point. And, what have you done to invest in life after this job? Because the grass is not greener on the other side. Right? It's that saying, it's greener where you water it. So what are you doing?
It's not all golf and fishing
to
trips, right?
Yes. Yeah. That gets boring pretty quickly, especially first responders. They don't know how to relax.
Yeah. Are there days when maybe there's something going on in the community? Maybe it's on the news. Maybe it's on, the smartphone feed that he's like, oh, I wish I could be there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. And even during the height of, with COVID and all that civil unrest, that lit a fire in him so immensely, where he wanted to be back at work and he wanted to be helping and to feel useful, and recognizing he couldn't do that. That stuff does pop up. I think one of the great things with the job I have is he understands it from his perspective. So when there are those days that are especially heavy or difficult, those roles are reversed. So now he's there, for me. And I think that's helps him a lot, and then just continuing to be there for our friends and people that we know. Those random emails that I'll get, hey, I have a question for you. I think definitely that helps him a lot.
So how has all this knowledge that you guys have gained over the past 7 years, how does that speak to you and your retirement plans?
For me, I definitely am. We're going to need to find some things to do. That's what we always say. If we take a vacation, like, man, we really need to find some stuff to do. So we're trying to do that more, taking trips, things that we like to do, even if it's just local stuff. Instead of, I think we lived as like, little hermits for so long. Right. And so now it's about really just reconnecting, with people that we haven't seen for a while, going on small trips, getting outdoors is a big one. But for me, it definitely is highlighted. Not only do I need to take care of myself throughout my career, but even into retirement, our gears are spinning, looking at retirement property and where we want to live, and not only stop there, but okay, what can we do once we get there?
Yeah. And all this is kind of rolling through my head because my wife is about 6.5 years from retiring. She's a school administrator and, super stressful right now and just counting down the years of when she can step out of that role. And so we're talking about, okay, what do we do? What's our plans? I'm self-employed. I can kind of work from anywhere, and I don't know if I'll ever retire officially, but, I want to always keep on doing something like this, or, at least with podcasting, I can kind of do it from anywhere. I don't have to like schlep gear all over the place to, which is becoming harder. But
nice.
So we're trying to figure out what that looks like as for us as a couple. And one thing we have decided to do is we love to travel. We love adventures, and we're even dabbling with maybe starting a YouTube channel. I don't know. The older retired couple doing the YouTube thing, I don't know. We'll see. But we love last year for our anniversary, and I want to highly recommend this. We went to Lisbon, Portugal for our anniversary.
Oh,
Absolutely loved it.
I
So much so
really?
that we're like, when she retires, we're going to move there for
Hmm.
like 6 months and just live
Oh,
there for
nice.
just 6 months because we have grandkids. So we don't
Hmm.
want to stay there permanently, uh,
Yeah.
and just go explore Europe and just do that and get that out of our system. And then we'll come back and figure out something
Hmm.
after that. But if you're
Yeah.
looking for a place to go, Portugal's amazing.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
I just got to get my husband on an
okay.
airplane. That's the next challenge.
Well, there is that, right? A small
Small
detail,
detail.
right? I guess you could take a boat. Might take a while, but
Yeah. Yeah. He'll need to be heavily
yeah.
sedated.
Let's see. Was that what was his name on the A team? He wouldn't fly anywhere.
Oh,
Mr. T. Mr. T.
yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, that's him. Exactly. Yeah. Just needs a huge
Right.
sedative. He'll be fine.
Very good. Well, let me ask you this: a couple more questions.
Mhm,
So, what do you do now? As you're in the middle of, you're a psychologist, you work with law
mhm,
enforcement, you hear involved with heavy stuff. What do you do to take care of you?
mhm. Um, I I'm somebody. I've always been somebody who needs individual time to
Mm-hmm.
recharge, um, and typically it looks probably outwardly like I'm not really doing much, but internally just processing through stuff. I'm a huge proponent of writing stuff down, and I've done that for years. This job has taught me the value of continuing to do that. And one thing I started to do instead of just kind of journaling to process the day is just writing down different perspectives gained from situations. So what did I learn? What do I understand better? And what do I maybe appreciate? Something that I didn't really, not that I didn't appreciate it, but didn't really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of those things that we take
Mm-hmm.
for granted. And so constantly maintaining that perspective for me is helpful. I enjoy spending time
Mm-hmm.
outdoors. And then sometimes, my husband, if I respond to a major incident or it's just been a series of incidents, I always say like I'm a sponge, right? So I'm there and I'm absorbing some of that
Mm-hmm.
people pain. And then I come home and then my husband hugs me. We call like he squeezes out the
Mm-hmm.
sponge. And so sometimes it's just, hey, I need a good cry and just to let my nervous system and everything
Mm-hmm.
reset, But yeah, I absolutely need to take care of myself so I can continue to take care
Sure.
of everybody
Sure.
else.
So,
Yeah.
final question: what's something fun you guys
Mhm.
are going to do in the next month?
Oh, man. Something fun in the next month. Can I do the next
Sure.
couple of
Sure.
months? Because we are going to
Okay.
Hawaii.
Awesome. So he's going
Yes,
to get
we
on a
just came
plane.
back from a mini vacation. He is for
Okay.
Hawaii. That's his
Okay.
one trip. I'm trying to get him to Europe because I want to do like
Oh
Ireland,
yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a work in progress. We're still working on that.
So Hawaii, that'll be a fun trip. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we went there 7 years ago for our 10-year
Okay.
anniversary. And then we meant to go back a couple years later, but between COVID, volcanoes erupting, and everything else, we're finally getting
Awesome.
back 7 years later. So
Awesome. Well, Medina,
yeah.
thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today. Really appreciate it. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to talk to you and to learn about
Likewise.
retirement, and maybe I can use some of that in my
Thank you.
own plans for the future. So I appreciate it. And where can
Absolutely.
people find
Yes.
your book, and how can they get in touch with you?
So the book, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's called Surviving Retirement, Finding Purpose and Fulfillment Beyond the Badge. And then also my website, www.drbaumgart.com, has information about the book, my trainings, one of which is a surviving retirement class that's now on demand.
Okay. And I'll be sure to link all those in the show notes for the podcast and let people know where they can get to it. So thank you again for being on the
Awesome.
program. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Baumgart, for the work you're doing with first responders. And thank you for listening and watching the show. I really appreciate it. And hey, please leave a review and give it 5 stars if you think it's worth it, and subscribe to the show. And be sure to share it with your network if you think it's valuable information. Also, just a reminder that you can see the video of this content on our YouTube channel. I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can access that. And remember, you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.